Hello and welcome to Taking the Scenic Route, Scenic Regional Library's bi-weekly podcast. I'm Steve Campbell, the library's director. Our podcast provides listeners with a closer look at the library, including interviews with upcoming program presenters, information about new and existing services, interviews with authors, book recommendations from our staff, and much, much more. So let's jump right in and get started. My first guest is Debbie Bandy. She is a member of the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble. I got it right, Debbie.
Yes, you did.
Schwarzer Zither Ensemble. She'll be performing at the New Haven branch on Thursday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. Debbie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank
Well,
you.
let's get started. First, I'm going to try to pronounce this again. What is the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble?
Well, the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble is a group of zither players that started in 2017 at the museum, the Washington Historical Society. And we're called the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble because most of us are playing zithers that were made by Franz Schwarzer here in Washington, Missouri. So that's where we got our name.
I didn't realize this group was so new. You know, I came into this honestly believing that this group had been around since he was alive,
Well,
like in the 1800s or something.
there was a group that was around when he was alive, but then he died, and then the factory closed down in the 1950s, and then zithering went out of style. But Washington Historical Society has a wonderful collection of zithers, and Richard Kruger is a man that came and wanted to get it started again. So he started it, and some people joined, and we keep adding people as they move into the area, and so that's where we started.
Okay, so before we go on any further, people are probably listening thinking, what's a zither? Can you explain to people what is a zither?
I will. I want to preface that by if anyone has seen the old movie The Third Man, that entire soundtrack soundtrack is played by a zither. So that's what a very good zither soloist sounds like.
I saw that. That was a movie, for those people who aren't aware, The Third Man was a movie in the late 1940s that starred Orson Welles.
Right.
And the theme song, I guess at the time in the late 40s, it became a big hit. The song
Right.
did. And it was performed, like you said, by a zither player from Austria, I believe it was.
And if you listen to it, it sounds like there's one more than one person playing, but because he knows what he's doing, that's just one man playing that zither. It's amazing. So, a zither, the word zither actually just means a flat stringed instrument. So, like a mountain dulcimer is a type
Okay.
of the zithers we play are Austro-Hungary, Germany instruments, and they sit on a table, or in the old days they played them on their laps, and they have, and this is what's really cool. So they have six strings like on a fretboard, and then they have anywhere from 32 to 42 strings that are like a harp beyond that. So you play the fretboard with your left hand and you pluck it with your right thumb, like a guitar, sort of, but it's flat. And then you play your own accompaniment with the other three fingers. You don't use your pinkies at all. Your other three fingers on your right hand, and you pluck them for accompaniment, and then your ring finger plays the bass note. So you can play chords while you're playing a melody with your left hand, while you're plucking with your right thumb. So if that sounds confusing, it's because it is. And if that sounds hard, it's because it is. This is one of the hardest instruments to play because it has so many strings. Um, and they're all tuned in fifths, so you can play boom chucks, we call them, like in polkas and stuff, boom chuck chuck, boom chuck chuck on the bass strings while you're plucking with your other hand on the frets.
So I was going to ask that question too. So I think from what I've always heard, and I did not play in band, I'm not a musician, but from what I've heard, the violin is considered one of the more difficult or one of the most difficult instruments to learn. And the banjo is, and the harmonica and things like that are considered some of the easiest. You think the zither would, it sounds like the zither would fall on the the end of the spectrum toward the violin. I guess it would be a very hard instrument to learn.
Oh yeah, it's harder than the violin.
Really?
Oh yeah. Both your hands are doing things all the time.
Sure, yeah.
With a violin, you hold it, you have a bow hand. The violin's very hard. And the banjo can be really hard too. But the zither, it's seen as playing three guitars at once. Got the melody, the accompaniment, and the bass, or like a guitar and a harp because you're plucking strings. It's kind of like patting your head and rubbing your stomach.
But it's not really guitar sounding. A little
No,
bit, but it
it's
definitely has other instrument sounds in with it.
yes, it sounds very metallic because we have steel strings, metal strings.
Hmm.
It doesn't if you have gut strings or nylon strings on a guitar, it's going to sound much more mellow than a zither does.
Hmm.
A zither is metallic sounding.
So how did you get involved with the ensemble, the Schwarzer, let me say it right one more time, the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble? How did you get involved with that?
Well, I like music and I like museums. So somebody at the church I go to invited me to come to one of the practices to see if I might be interested. So I went to a practice. I said, "Oh, this sounds like fun." And so the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble, this is the time for me to say this too. We practiced at the Washington Historical Society 2 afternoons a week, Wednesday and Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30. And we welcome anybody who wants to come, and we have loaner zithers. So I could go to see if I really wanted to learn how to play the zither, and I didn't have to, buy a zither or rent a zither. We have loaner zithers for anybody that might be interested. So I
So,
got, go ahead.
so what instruments did you play before? It sounds like you've been a musician maybe your whole life. Is that
I,
accurate?
yeah, I played clarinet in high school.
Okay,
And I played the piano some and the guitar some. I can
okay,
read music, so
sure.
it's something I've always enjoyed dabbling in, and so now I'm dabbling in the zither.
I mean, that obviously would be a lot easier when you have an instrument like the zither to come into learning it with when you've already learned instruments before, obviously.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to know how to read music.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, I'd never played a stringed instrument before, but well, a little bit on guitar, but because I know how to read music, it was a little easier for me to jump in.
So is the music written for the zither? Is that like really old music they've had to dig up basically from when this instrument was much more popular, I guess? I mean, they're not currently writing new music for zithers, are they?
No, but we play anything. I mean, if you open any hymnal, a zither can play it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, so we play. Of course, we play the Third Man theme song,
Hmm.
and we play country western. We play America the Beautiful. We play German music. We do have polkas and things that because of the German heritage of the
Hmm.
instrument. But it's just regular music, so we can play any music that's written.
And that's where the instrument originated, was you mentioned Austro-Hungarian Empire, Germany, Austria. That's the region where the instrument was first created.
Yes, it was. And I can tell you about Franz Schwarzer now if you'd like me to.
Absolutely. That was one of my
Okay.
next questions.
Because he's from Olmütz, Austria.
Okay.
And he and his wife, Josephine, came over to America about 1864. And he was going to be a farmer, but that didn't really work out for him. His father was a furniture maker, and so he knew how to make furniture. So he made furniture, and he also made the first altar screen at Borgia, the church, Borgia Catholic
Hmm.
Church. So before the first one burned down, but he was a furniture cabinet maker, and then he decided to make zithers. So his factory, which was down on Front Street, made zithers from about 1880, and he died in 1904. But the factory kept making zithers, and somebody kept, restoring them and stringing them until the 1940s, early 1950s. The factory's not there anymore, but Franz Schwarzer's house is still down by the river. You can't really,
Really?
yeah, you can't really get to it. You have to see it if you're walking the trail, you can see it. It's privately owned.
Oh.
Yeah. So he was a fascinating man.
That
And
could
he,
be a Zither museum they could turn that into.
yeah, yeah, if wasn't living in it. So,
That's true.
but he made 11,000 zithers, all different kinds. And his zithers, this is why Washington is such a draw for the zither, is because of him. And he was so good at it, he made some improvements with the supports in the body of the zither. And he made such good zithers that he took zithers to the exposition in Austria and won. He won the
Wow.
gold medal for zithers. So that's a huge selling point.
Yeah.
And in the late 1800s or early 1900s, a governor of Missouri wanted to give a family member the best zither in the world. So he rode off to Austria for a zither. And when he got to him, inside was the label that said Franz Schwarzer Zither. So the Austrians bought the zither from Franz Schwarzer in Washington and then sent it back to the governor of Missouri.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, it is. And most of us are playing Franz Schwarzer Zithers.
Wow.
My zither was built in 1896.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. And so they're all made individually. So the case that my zither goes in was made for my zither because no other case is going to fit it.
Sure.
And Josephine, his wife, would do the inlays. Some of them are just beautiful with mother of pearl inlays on them.
Are these instruments, because they're, 125, 130 years old, are they worth a lot of money?
Well, no.
Okay.
You have, you can find Franz Schwarzer zithers sometimes on eBay or whatever, but they need to be serviced. So the zither that I have, there's a luthier in St. Louis that does beautiful work, and there was a crack down the back of my zither, so he fixed that, and I think he replaced a couple of frets. So he worked on a little bit to make it playable, but the zither itself was made by in 1896.
That's wow. That's
It's
amazing.
really cool. And we have about 14 members in the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble, and probably 10 of us are playing zithers made by Franz Schwarzer.
But the factory you said in Washington, it remained open into the 1950s.
Well, it got smaller and smaller until by the late 1940s, there were just a few people working there.
So
So,
when was in terms of popularity of the zither as an instrument, what do you think, what is your understanding of the peak of that?
well, we talked about that a little bit yesterday when I talked with our members because I wasn't quite sure what the peak would have been, but we came out with probably right before World War One.
Okay.
Because when World War One happened, the sentiments towards German Americans cooled.
Hmm.
And I think that was Zither's music started going out of style. And so since then, the interest in the Zither has waned.
Okay. So I guess anti-German feelings during World War One really
Uh,
hurt the
yeah,
industry.
yeah, I think so. And the zither is hard to play and it doesn't have, you can put a mic on it, but it's really hard to put a mic on. It's a quiet instrument. I mean, you can't take a zither and go to a concert hall and expect anybody to be able to hear it. So we play indoors. We don't play outdoors because it just doesn't sound out very well. So they would take zithers. I've seen pictures and there's a wonderful zither exhibit at the museum. It's upstairs and has lots and lots of information about the zither and some pictures. And they used to have zither parties. So, like 10 people would go on some boats and have a picnic, and they'd bring their zithers and sing German songs with them. And this was in
Wow.
early 1900s. So, the zither was a big deal.
It
And
sounds like it.
yeah,
So if someone wants to, you mentioned if someone wants to learn how to play, does your group also teach people how to play?
yes, we do.
Okay.
We have one of our members, Ann Prinz, that's what she does, is she teaches people how to play the zither. And not all of us, when somebody comes, help out. We can all help teach somebody how to play the zither.
So a
And we
new person who has never played a zither or really, I guess they should have played some kind of instrument, but if they never played the zither, they can show up at the Washington Historical Museum. Is that
uh-huh.
right?
Yes.
And they can. And what are the times and dates of those meetings?
Wednesday and Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30. And it's
Okay.
the Washington Historical Society and it's on Market Street in Washington.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And are the zithers typically played as an ensemble or are they played solo?
Well, We play them ensemble. There are such things as zither orchestras. Tommy Timerson is definitely a solo zither player. He's probably the best one in the world. And he has two zither orchestras in Switzerland and one in Germany. And he was here in the middle of April for the International Zither Gathering. And we had 30 zither players, and they were from Germany and Canada and Wisconsin and all over the United States. And we had all practiced music. And then he came and gave us a workshop for 4 days. And then we had a concert at Emmanuel Lutheran
There,
Church.
there's an international zither organization.
Yes, it's loose. It's a loose organization, but the wonderful thing is, one year it's in Germany, and the next year it's here. So I've been playing since 2017, and I've been able to work with and under Tommy Temerson 3 times, which is just amazing. You ought to hear that man play the zither. It's just He's a solo zitherist. It's just amazing, and he's so good getting us all to play together, and we just have a great time. And the audience seemed to have enjoyed it too. And we played a lot of German music, but we played piece by Grieg. We played ragtime piece. We played all different kinds of music. It was a lot of fun.
So I mentioned you'll be doing the program at the New Haven branch. Will you be playing solo? You'll be playing with the ensemble there. How many of you will be there?
Well, I think we're going to be able to have 10 people at
Wow.
And we have a wonderful guitarist, and she keeps us grounded. So we have one guitarist, and then we'll have 9 zither players. Yeah, we play for about 45 minutes and, take questions and afterwards, and people come up and are always interested, and they can sit down and pluck at it if they want to. So most of us, well, maybe not most, well, probably at least half of us are retired teachers. So we love going places and answering questions about the zither and telling them the history of it.
You let people pluck on your 130-year-old
Yeah, that's right.
instrument.
Exactly. They can't hurt it, they
I
can't.
would caution you against that for some reason, but
No, it's made to be played, and we've enjoyed so much playing in the scenic regional branches. We've just had a great time. I think we've played in all of them but Warrenton and Wright City. Yeah, that's really been fun. We played at St. Peter's during the Christmas concert. We played for Christmas at midnight, Moonlight Christmas in New Haven. We played there at Christmas time. We've played at the courthouse for Christmas. We played at the opening of Washmo on the Go. We've played at wineries. We played at Mantell Church, Krakow, Port Hudson outside of New Haven. So we've played around.
I've not seen your group perform live, but I did that when I was, preparing for this interview. I did go on to our Facebook pages of our Pacific branch and some of the other branches where your group has performed,
Uh-huh.
and I listened to some Christmas songs that
Yeah.
your group had performed, and they were great.
Okay. Yeah, that we played a Christmas program the first part of December in Pacific, and that was a lot of fun.
Well, Debbie, thank you very much for joining me today. Once again, Debbie and other members of the apparently 9 other members of the ensemble will be performing at our New Haven branch on Thursday, May 22nd at 6 p.m. You can register for the program by visiting scenicregional.org/events. You can also like and follow I'm going to try to say it, the Schwarzer Zither Ensemble Facebook page, which I saw there is a Facebook page for
There
the
is.
group. And
There
then,
is.
as she mentioned, the Washington Historical Society on Market in Washington on Wednesdays and Sundays from what time again was that?
1:30 to 3:30.
1:30 to 3:30. If you are a musician and wanting to learn a new instrument, you can learn how to play the zither at the Washington Historical Society.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
My next guest is Sue Blesi. She has researched and written about Franklin County history for almost 40 years. She wrote a local history column in the Missourian for many years and has been active in numerous historical societies. Sue also started the Franklin County History Fair in 2001, which continues to this day. And she also began a series of local history classes at East Central College in 2004, which also is still continuing to this day. She's written several books on local history. Her latest book is Hanged by the Neck Until Dead, Lynchings and Hangings in Franklin County, Missouri. She'll be giving an author talk about the book at our St. Clair branch on Tuesday, May 20th at 6 p.m. Sue, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're very honored to have you here. I think when someone thinks about history in Franklin County, your name is the first one to come up.
Oh, my. That's an honor.
Let's get started. What sparked your interest in Franklin County history?
Well, it started when my ex-husband and I bought a farm south of St. Clair. We didn't know anything about the history of the place, but while the moving truck was still in the driveway, area archaeologist Ken Middleton pulled up, and he started telling me all about the property. George Hurst, the grandfather of the famous mining engineer by the same name, he had obtained that property on a land patent the first day you could even get a land patent in Franklin County. And I was fascinated. As Ken told the story, I became more and more fascinated. And as soon as I unpacked, I began learning all I could about the Hearst. And from that, it grew into their friends and associates. Then it grew into St. Clair and Virginia Mines. And then it just involved the entire county and to some extent beyond, but primarily focused on Franklin County. And that was 40 years ago.
Wow. So do you have any formal training or education as a historian?
No, not really. Up to that point, my field of interest had always been psychology and writing.
Oh, okay.
I had been a supervisor for the Postal Service, and I was an editor for a couple of papers for a while. Although I did love the stories that my grandmother passed down to me about early hardship. For example, her grandmother, who had twin babies, and of course no plumbing, had to get water from a distant spring while my great-great-grandfather was away on a cattle drive. Well, she had two babies that could barely, they were crawling. I don't know if they were able to walk at all or not. And she couldn't carry 2 buckets of water and 2 babies. So she had to tie the babies to the bedpost so she could go get water for them. And you know, think about what that would cause today.
Yeah.
But it was what she had to do to survive. And stories like that were just really fascinating.
What decade or year was that going on when she was doing that?
Well, I know he went to the Civil War.
Oh, wow.
Her husband did. So it was probably before the Civil War.
Yeah. I've said it before, too. I feel like when I read history books, nonfiction history books, my favorite book typically are written by journalists. They just have a different writing style that I think appeals to readers better than maybe a history professor or something like that. So I think your journalism background probably contributes to the success of your history books.
Well, I think that probably when you work with journalism, you're writing because you want to write something the reader will enjoy reading about. And with history book, that's not quite the focus. Mm-hmm. So I think that might make a difference.
Sure. So when someone thinks about the United States and American history, they think about watershed events like the World Wars or the Great Depression. You mentioned the Civil War, the moon landing, even more recently. What are some of the biggest historical events in Franklin County history, would you say?
Well, certainly all of the wars greatly affected the county because they lost so many young men in battle and so many went off to battle and had to leave their families. But the Civil War was particularly devastating because Sterling Price and his Confederate troops conducted a devastating raid through the county in the fall of 1864. They killed people, they destroyed property, they stole anything of value, including horses, livestock, anything they could eat. They destroyed crops and household furnishings. They burned buildings, including the Methodist Church in St. Clair and many others. And they forced men to join them. In one case, close to Beaufort, the invaders stole the baby diapers off the clothesline. And when they crossed the bridge over the Berbers at Union, their wagons and artillery and horses and all their loot and troops, that heavy traffic and weight destroyed the old bridge. It was completely unusable after Price's raid went through. a lot more happened, but of course, it'd be impossible to tell everything, even in a full day, if I could remember it all.
Sure.
Two of my lynchings were Civil War related.
Okay, well,
in my book.
We'll get to that shortly. Actually, we can get that right now. I mentioned, like I mentioned, you have a new book, Hanged by the Neck Until Dead, Lynchings and Hangings in Franklin County, Missouri. What can you tell us about the book?
Well, it includes the stories about all the legal hangings that have taken place in the county, and some that were for crimes committed in Franklin County, but actually tried in neighboring counties. It includes all the lynchings, as well as lynchings that almost happened. And I say all the lynchings, I'm talking about all the known lynchings, because some may have occurred before anything was recorded in the very earliest of times. And then there's a third chapter in it of things that just didn't fit neatly into the other chapters, but still related to Franklin County.
So the difference between a lynching and a hanging would be a hanging is done after due process. Someone's gone to court, found guilty, and then they're hanged as their method of execution. Whereas a lynching, correct me if I'm wrong, would be something where someone is hanged without due process. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, and I use the word separately to convey which it was. I don't say hanging, even though technically lynchings are hangings.
Sure.
I just call a legal one a hanging, and then I call the lynchings, the illegal ones, lynchings. In the era before they had gas chambers and electric chairs, and I guess we didn't even have firing squads here. But anyway, that's how it was done. They hanged anyone who was convicted of a crime deserving death. Anyway, there've been 6 legal hangings in Franklin County, and they're all detailed in Hanged by the Neck Until Dead, and they were all white men.
Mm-hmm. Were they done in union?
The ones who were, yes.
Okay. With the county
all
court
the
here, I figured with the county courthouse here, that's probably where it happened.
Yes, and not all of them were done right there. Some of them were done a few blocks from the courthouse. But
okay.
Yes.
Are there any photos in your book? To be honest, I haven't actually got to see your book yet, but other than the cover, but I'm definitely eager to look at it. But are there any photos of those legal hangings? Because I know that they used to take photos of that type of thing.
I don't have a specific photo of a legal hanging with a person in it, although I know they were selling the photos of Rudolph and Collins, or Rudolph anyway. They were selling those photographs. The newspaper was, but I have never seen one. If I had one of those, it would certainly have been in there. But I do have photographs of the people. Now, in the lynchings area, there are no photographs, because anyone involved in the lynching, that was an illegal act. And they did everything they could to keep from being identified, and they didn't rat on each other either. So there's no photographs of lynching.
Sure.
But of hangings, I have a lot of information on some of the hangings.
When I think of lynching, I think most people think of the Deep South, not Missouri, Alabama, Mississippi. How many lynchings were there in this area, Franklin and Gasconade County, that you have record of?
Well, I haven't even begun to count in Gasconade County. I have 8 in my chapter, and it's impossible to answer that question accurately because, like I said before, some of them took place before there were records made. And they were done maybe on private property. Maybe it was a slave, somebody lynching a slave for some infraction, and maybe it didn't even become known to others. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But after decades of research, I think I've uncovered all of them for which information is available.
So the people that you do have recordings of that were lynched, were they all Black, African-American people?
No, like I said, all of them who were hanged legally were white. Mm-hmm. And out of the 8 lynchings covered in the first chapter, there were 2 Black men and one Black woman.
Okay.
The other 5 were of white men. In the hangings chapter, in the last chapter, the hodgepodge chapter of things that didn't quite fit, 2 of the 6 discussed were Black, 2 out of 6. So it really was predominantly white people who were lynched in Franklin
Wow.
County.
That's really
Yes,
amazing because most people think of lynchings, they think of Black people being lynched.
yes, yes, they do.
Wow. So I know you've written other books. One of them is a pictorial history of Union. How did you go about, and I have looked through that before, how did you go about finding all the photographs you had in that book?
Oh my. Well, I talk to people. I have a lot of friends who are also involved in history and also collect information and photographs. I got some of them from the city hall in Union.
Oh, okay.
And I had personal files that I had been collecting already for years,
Hmm.
many of which did come from old timers. The old timers enjoyed sharing their stories and their photographs with me. And, that was 4 decades ago. So those old timers are all gone now.
Sure.
But I also checked with state and local museums. I checked all the resources I could think of.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the Schnook store,
Hmm.
which used to be Frike's, they have some of my photographs up by the ceiling and giant ones. Some of the photographs I had, I took to Walgreens. And, they wanted me to do this project. I took them to Walgreens and had those giant pictures made. And there's some in their break room as well, some smaller ones. The labels on them, I did not put on them. They're kind of not quite right, some of them. But
Yeah.
anyway, there's photographs in the break room as well as those large ones that are up by the ceiling. If you go into Schnucks, look up, and you'll see those.
I didn't realize those came from you. That's amazing. Wow.
Right. They were some
What's
of the ones I used in my book.
You mentioned during the Civil War that the bridge going over the Burbus here in Union was destroyed, and I drive past that where that bridge used to be all the time. Was that the last time they had a covered bridge there, or was that covered bridge rebuilt and it was there a lot longer after that?
Well, the Red Bridge was
Mm.
there after that,
Oh,
and the
okay.
Red Bridge was destroyed by a tornado and flipped upside down in the river. It was a
Oh,
covered bridge. It's the one you see in the covered bridge photos of Union.
okay.
There's no photographs of that first one. And it wasn't even in the same exact location. I can't tell you exactly where it was, but it wasn't where it wasn't where the present bridge is. But no, the Red Bridge, it was flipped upside down in a tornado and people actually got out and walked on the bottom of it. It was in the river upside down. And
Wow.
there is a photograph of people walking on the bottom of it.
When did that happen? What
And that's
decade was that?
I'm just guessing. I think it was 1920 or 1922. It was
Wow.
in that era. And there's a picture of that in the Union book that I did.
Sure. So and that was and then they replaced that with just a regular bridge after that.
Yes. And then that one is long gone now.
Sure.
And it was one of those with a steel superstructure.
Sure. Now you've had some other books. You've had several books that you've written and had published. Can you talk a little bit about those books? What did those cover?
Well, one was about Stanton, and it was called Where Dead Men Still Fight, A History of Stanton, Missouri.
Hmm.
And the other one was Gleanings from the Past, and it was just it has a lot of information in it. It was my early newspaper columns from 1991 to 1996 from the Missourian. Those are not available from the Missourian now. So
Can people
I thought it would be a good idea to publish those.
can people buy those two books on Amazon?
Not right now. I had an Amazon store, but I had a medical issue a couple of years ago and shut my store down, and I've been trying to reopen it, and it's a struggle. But they are available at various places. St. Clair Historical Society has them. Union Historical Society has them. My present book on the lynchings and hangings is at quite a few places. It's at those places. Let's see, I think I wrote it down here. They're also at Neighborhood Reads in Washington, at Route 66, This and That in St. Clair, and the Franklin County Historical Society. I think that's about it for right now, but I'm looking for stores. Now that my history class finished up last night, I'm going to be more actively working on marketing it. And I'm ready to find a store in Sullivan, Pacific, Gerald, and New Haven if anyone knows of a place that carries books in those towns. And my email address, I don't mind giving it out, is SueBlesi46@gmail.com.
Okay, I can include that in the podcast notes as well. With your other books, with all your books, including Hang by the Neck Until Dead, how do you go about researching those topics?
Well, it's kind of hard to answer. In a way, my answer is about the same as it was for Lynchings and Hangings. I've talked to so many of the old timers, and I didn't just take people's word for things. You know, I would take what they told me and then go research it and find something to validate it. But I have tons of research material. I'm sitting in my office now as we do this podcast, and I have many, my whole wall is full of binders of information I've collected, and I have a lot more I need to sort and put into binders. But yeah, I've been collecting for all those years, and photographs and any information I could get from newspapers, from museums, you know, from all kinds of sources. The Four Rivers Genealogy Society has a ton of information because they've been operating for, I'm not sure exactly, but close to 40 years. And they used to be on the third floor of a building that was owned by the Catholic Church over in Washington, down on Main Street. You had to climb up 2 flights of stairs to get up there. But I was researching back when they first started. I used to go to the library in Union to use the microfilm readers and get microfilm newspaper back before you could do anything on a computer. And I bought well over 100 hardbound newspaper books, such as the newspapers always have, of their own books, of their own editions. And I had a lot of those, but they were hard to research in because the papers were brittle and the pages would tear whenever you turned them. So that was not a very good way to research, because I didn't want to tear up the books, but yet I wanted the information. Sure. And I ended up donating them after I was able to get newspapers.com.
I know this is kind of a little off topic, but I know in the late 1960s there was a bank robbery or a bomb explosion in a bank robbery in Union. You've ever researched that before?
Well, I have a lot of information on it. I guess it's not at the forefront in my brain right now, sure. But I have definitely researched it, and I've had speakers before at my local history class at East Central. I've had speakers who were there when it happened.
Wow.
But of course, that's been a few years ago. Yeah. And anyway, yes, I've been very interested in it. I haven't written about it, though.
Were there other events like that you can think of that happened, not just in Union, but in the county? Other things like bank robberies and explosions that people might not know about?
Well, there was a bank robbery, Farmers and Merchants Bank. I can't tell you the year. It was in the 20s. Okay. The Feather Edge gang came out from St. Louis, trying to think of the name of the car they were driving. It was a luxury car, something that nobody in St. Clair had ever seen, and which made it very easy to know you were seeing their vehicle. A Stutz Bearcat, that's what it was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were in a Stutz Bearcat, and they robbed the bank, and they started toward Moselle, because they were going to go to St. Louis that way. And they got mired down in the mud, and they had to turn around and come back to St. Clair, where they had just robbed the bank, and head out a different way. And I forgot what happened then. I think they broke a wheel, or a wheel came off or something, and they had to start walking through the pastures and woods and everything. And they went down to the Pacific area and hid out in a I guess you'd call it a river cabin.
Wow.
They were captured. But it was it was almost a comedy.
Yeah.
All the things that happened with that. They blew up the safe and they took money, but of course it was all recovered.
Yeah, that could be a book by itself.
It could be. You know, we have the the three bank robberies, the Rudolph and Collins bank robbery, which is in my book. And then we have the one you mentioned and the farmers and merchants. And there's several other bank robberies too, but those are the three that I think of first.
Was there ever like a very high profile murder case in the county or anything like that?
Well, actually, there's one involved in my hangings chapter.
Oh, okay.
Rudolph and Collins. Rudolph and Collins robbed the Bank of Union, and then they holed up near Stanton at Rudolph's stepfather's house. And while they were there, a Pinkerton detective, a national Pinkerton detective, figured out where they were, and they killed him, and that was in papers nationwide.
Wow.
And so, yes, we've had some high-profile cases, but that's the first one that comes to mind because I just worked on it recently, and there's a very long chapter on Rudolph and Collins in the book. One of the reasons it's so long is because there were a lot of photographs and a lot of information available about that one. So I figured I would give people everything I had.
Sure. Wow. That is fascinating. We don't have very many cases in Franklin County that become national news, at least not my memory,
right.
My recent memory.
Well, and there was another one. I can't think of his name right now. He's in there too. It was a doctor in St. Louis, and his case was moved to Franklin County on a change of venue, and he was hanged here in Franklin County. But yes, he was an alcoholic, and he had killed his wife and 2-year-old son. And he was tried here in Franklin County. That also made the national news.
I bet. Wow. Well, thank you, Sue. Your latest book, like I mentioned, Hang by the Neck Until Dead, Lynchings and Hangings in Franklin County, Missouri, is available, I believe you said, at Neighborhood Reads and the St. Clair Historical Society, as well as the Franklin County Historical Society in Union. And Sue will be giving an author talk about this book at our St. Clair branch on Tuesday, May 20th at 6 p.m. You can register at scenicregional.org/events. Sue, will you be selling copies of the book at your program at the St. Clair Library as well?
Oh, yes, I'll definitely have books with me for sale.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for joining me, Sue.
Thank you for asking me.
Well, that wraps up the latest episode of Taking the Scenic Route, Scenic Regional Library's podcast. I hope that you can join me again in 2 weeks when we release our next episode.